clearly you've done a lot of research on Watergate. Where did the idea originally start for you?
So the last film I did, which is called Bernard and Huey, there's a little poster for it right there. That was we finished shooting that in New York City on pretty much right at in November 2016, the day before the election. The presidential election that year, and then the next day, the day after the election, went out to show my dailies. Went out to the Shelter Island, which is near the Hamptons on the tip of Long Island, to show the dailies to Jules Feiffer, who's the screenwriter of Bernard and Huey. And Feiffer is most famously known and won a Pulitzer Prize for being a political cartoonist in the 70s for The Village Voice, where he did a lot of Nixon cartoons and a lot of Watergate related cartoons. And so we were inevitably talking about, how is America going to survive Trump and what could possibly go wrong? And, and he was kind of contextualizing it. We were talking about Nixon a lot, like, oh, well, we survived Nixon as a country one way or another, and anyway, so we were just talking a lot about Nixon and Watergate in general. And then that night, I stayed with my friend Terry Keefe, who owns the Silver Sands Motel. His grandparents had built it in the 50s and 60s, and he inherited it and moved in about 8 years ago. And he said, well, look, we've shot a lot of fashion videos here and, fashion shoots for like Vogue and Harper's and music videos, but no one's ever shot a feature. If you ever come up with something that could be shot here, we're closed in the winter, everyone can stay here. So that kind of got the ball rolling in my head, like, 70s location, Nixon, Watergate. And I had been a student of, I majored in history and political science. I'd worked in Washington for a couple of years as a speechwriter. So I'd thought about Watergate a lot over the years and kind of always been hoping to do something with it. And this was kind of the perfect location, the perfect time. And then I teamed up with a writing partner named Daniel Moya, and coincidentally, his aunt and uncle owned this great diner, the Front Street Station Diner, just down the street from the motel. And we're like, well, that's two locations. We have to make an indie film for that, So, and that was really, and then it was just a matter of figuring out the story that would work. We started shooting March 3rd, 2020. What could possibly go wrong? So we got 11 days in, and then we heard the DGA, the Directors Guild, came out to visit, and we're very impressed that we were kind of in our own hermetically sealed bubble almost, and they said, oh, this is great. You guys, are doing great out here. You're actually the last feature shooting in North America. And we're like, what wow. Does everyone else know that we haven't heard yet? And so we shut down, like everyone else. And we had 4 days left to go. So I grabbed the hard drive, came back to LA where I live. Most of the cast and crew were New York based. And actually a third of our crew wound up staying at the Silver Sands for 2 more months because it was a perfect place to quarantine. And they were like all the single Brooklyn people. They were like afraid to go to the city. And Terry said, well, just stay here. And actually our cinematographer, Elle Schneider, she stayed for 6 months. So, but I started editing the film. We started working on the music. We recorded the Nixon tape with Bruce Campbell, John Cryer, and Ted Raimi. We actually did that over Zoom like this because the actors were all stuck at their houses, and we could do it that way. And then 6 months later, in September 2020, we were one of the first films that actually went back into production using the Screen Actors Guild and DGA COVID safe protocols, and everyone stayed safe, and we finished off the film that way.
It was fun. I was trying to think back how I became aware of the film, and I think it was Twitter, just all your communications on Twitter, just said, okay, I'm going to give him $50.
Yeah, thanks.
But you're a great communicator in all of the updates you do to donors and all of your posts, and I think you must live on social media.
Well, not quite, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Greg. And really, and this is a community of people that made it. I mean, we had almost 400 supporters and backers and donors of every kind, from $1 to $50,000 and everything in between. But it really, was thanks to social media for getting that word out. And that's kind of how I've done most of my films. Is really, or pretty much all my films, is one way or the other, find a community of people and supporters, because really to make these films the way we're making them, you have to have kind of cast agnostic financing. Mm-hmm. If we had And this is a lesson I learned from Robert Altman years ago. He said, set a start date, tell everyone, the train's leaving the station, we're making this movie. If we had waited or delayed even a week or 2 weeks, to get the perfect cast or the, perfect financing or anything like that, we probably never would have made the movie at all. And this is a perfect example. I mean, the fact that we got about 80% of the film in the can, before the pandemic hit was pretty remarkable. And if we hadn't done that, I don't know that we ever would have gone back and made this.
So how did you do your casting?
Well, Willa Fitzgerald, who some of you may recognize now, she just did Reacher. She's a female lead in Reacher on Amazon. She was great. She was just suggested by her agent in New York, and Daniel and I met with her. She was literally the first person we ever met with for the part. We then thought about a bunch of other people, but for various reasons, they wouldn't do it, whatever. But so we kind of came back to Willa, and she was still very enthusiastic about it and was great. But we only kind of finally cast her about a week before shooting. John Magaro is someone that was recommended to me by Kelly Reichardt because he starred in First Cow, and he's actually in her new film that's premiering at Cannes next month, which is really great. And so he came on board pretty early, but then we had someone else playing Lena who dropped out because of scheduling reasons right before the shoot. So we were still we shot the first week with Willa and John, Connie and Paul, and we still didn't know who Lena and Samuel were going to be. And then literally with about 36 hours notice, we got the amazing Vondie Curtis Hall and Kathy Curtin to play them.
They were awesome.
And they were fantastic. And they came in and blew it out of the park. And a lot of those reactions that Willa and John have, that Connie and Paul have to them and the swinging scene, were legit, because we didn't really have time to rehearse or even get to know them very well. And then those were pretty honest reactions, like, what have we gotten ourselves into? We were all kind of asking that question, but it was working. And so let's go with it. Let's have fun with this.
So you found the Silver Sands in the diner. What was the 1970s, the set dressing and all of that stuff for the 1970s? How hard was that? And
most of the set dressing came from the hotel itself. They actually do a film camp there every summer or every winter, and so they've kind of accumulated a lot of props over the years. But we had a great production designer, Monica Dabrowski, and she also rented a few things. The tape players, and we had to get like 4 or 5 of them. We got those on eBay, and they all worked, which was pretty amazing. And then, so that was kind of the key prop that we really needed to get and make sure it worked. And then we had an amazing costume designer, Sarah Kogan, who actually collects old patterns, vintage patterns. And then she would literally seamstress, like make them like in the middle of the night. The new costumes would appear the next morning, which was pretty remarkable. I mean, she had some collection of vintage clothes, but a lot of it was handmade. One thing, just going back to kind of that 70s look and feel, I mean, this is something that, we kind of talked to all the departments about, that, we only tried to use technology and techniques along in filmmaking that could have been used in 1974. So there's no drones, there's no steady cams, because those were 1976, things like that. So we had a great cinematographer, El Schneider. The music was all original music. I have a fantastic composer named Luis Guerra, who I worked with on my last film as well. And we got an amazing vocalist named Caro Pieroto, who's Brazilian but lives in LA. And we kind of, we wanted to do something original that wasn't just needle drop music, because number one, you can't afford it in an indie film. But number two, it's been done a million times, Rolling Stones and Creedence, things like that. So we decided to go with kind of this all bossa nova, tropicalia, which was kind of psychedelic Brazilian music from the 70s kind of theme to it. And so I wrote the lyrics to the songs that have lyrics, and Luis did all the music. And then Caro recorded partially in LA and partially in Brazil. And we had a friend in Brazil translate some of the lyrics back into Portuguese. Our horn section was actually in Mexico City, because again, during the pandemic, people were kind of stuck wherever they were, and a lot of musicians couldn't perform live. So you could get some pretty amazing people around the world to help make this thing. And we actually we're just putting the full soundtrack out on it'll be on Spotify and iTunes, but we printed a few limited edition these are called flexis with,
I remember those.
yeah, with two of the songs with Brasilia Bella and Wonder Bread from the end credits. So these are, well, right now we're kind of giving them out at live events, but we may have them for sale at some point. But but the full soundtrack will be for sale digitally.
I'm glad you answered that, because I remember seeing Brazil and Mexico scroll by in the credits, and I was thinking, now, how did they end up in Brazil to record?
I know. Yeah. Well, I had my last film, Bernard and Huey, and also 18 and a half, both played at the Sao Paulo International Film Festival. So I had just come back from there right when Daniel and I were working on the screenplay. And so when we were trying to think about the character of what kind of music would Lena and Samuel be listening to in the on their version of the tape. I was like, you know what, let's go Brazil and just embrace bossa nova, because that was, for a middle-aged couple in the 70s, that would have been kind of the hip thing to be listening to. It was kind of right before it became cheesy in the late and turned into music. And it was sort of an original, but still kind of, very period specific way of signifying kind of what they would be listening to and when they would be listening to it. And then Brasilia Bella, which kind of becomes Connie's theme song, really. You hear it in English at the end of the film over the end credits and when she's in the car. But it's also the Portuguese version is what they're dancing to. That I kind of told Luis, because that we wrote before we even wrote the script, or sort of as we were working on the script. I was like, it's sort of Girl from Ipanema meets the Mary Tyler Moore theme song, sort of that 70s feminism, of Mary Tyler Moore, but with the kind of Girl from Ipanema beat. Yeah.
So what are you working on next?
Well, this is still keeping me very busy. So this is actually one of our last festival appearances. We've played total of about 21 festivals in 8 countries. There's still a few more to come, but the film is getting a theatrical release starting May 27th in LA, and then opening nationwide June 3rd, and playing kind of all the month of June in different places. And then it's coming out on video on demand and streaming in July. And then the Blu-ray and DVDs coming out after that. We're just getting ready to sign a deal for that, as well as airline and ship releasing is coming out the end of summer as well. So I know that, even though we have distributors for all these things, which is amazing, there is still a lot of work I have to do just in deliverables and in providing different versions of the film for all these different companies, and doing the extras. I've already been editing, like interviews with the cast and behind the scenes footage and things like that. So this is going to keep me busy for at least the next 6 months. So I'm not really sure what's next. Yeah.
So I've been impressed that your email address says Slamdance on it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm one of the co-founders of the Slamdance Film Festival, which, for those who don't know, was started in 1995 as kind of a scruffy alternative to Sundance, and it still basically is. We've been doing it ever since then, and our focus has been on first-time directors with limited budgets and no distribution, and so, which has been a little distinct from Sundance's niche, which kind of they went after bigger. Starting in the mid 90s, they were going after second times films and bigger budgets, and so that kind of created the niche where we could come in and support the first time directors. But speaking of superhero movies, we kind of helped discover or showed the first films of Christopher Nolan, the Russo brothers, Rian Johnson. Bong Joon-ho, we showed his first film, and he came. That was his first trip to the States, was with us. Lena Dunham, the late Lynn Shelton, all kinds of people that have gone on to, literally billions of dollars of box office. So anyways, I'm still a little bit involved with the festival. I'm not very much on the day-to-day side because I'm busy making films, but it's been a great, ongoing success.
Well, I look forward to reading your updates, and good luck in your Oscar quest.
Thank you. And for anyone else who wants to, follow along with the what happens next on the film, just find us on the social medias. It's sort of at 18.5 movie, or our we have a new website, www.18.5movie.com. So look for us there. And thanks again to River Run and to Greg and Jamie and everyone here in the audience. Really appreciate it.